Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Armen Torchyan will defend the academic thesis Income Inequality and Socioeconomic Differences in Adolescents' Health and Health Behavior in Post-Communist Countries of Europe. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you, dear Prorector, Corona members, family, friends, and colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to present my research on income inequality and socioeconomic differences in adolescent health and health behavior in post-communist countries of Europe. During my presentation, I will provide background information to justify the need for this research, discuss the data and methods used in our studies, highlight the key findings, and conclude with recommendations. A substantial body of evidence indicates that high income inequality within a country can create a harmful psychosocial environment due to increased status anxiety within different population groups, including those from low-income and high-income backgrounds. High-income inequality can create a society characterized by low social cohesion, a lack of trust, and diminished social capital. It can foster unhealthy behaviors such as increased alcohol use, junk food consumption, violence and bullying, ultimately affecting population health. After the Cold War, many post-communist countries of Europe adopted neoliberal reforms to recover their ruined economies and attract business investments. However, long-lasting and sometimes even radical neoliberal reforms aggravated income inequality in many of those countries. Imagine a building where neighbors from different socioeconomic backgrounds, such as a doctor, a teacher, a carpenter, or a taxi driver, live next to each other with more or less similar conditions, help and support each other in case of need, and celebrate different holidays together. But at some point, while some of them are starting to experience financial hardship, and the support provided by the governmental institutions is negligible, others enjoying luxurious lifestyle with frequent partying and restaurant visits. Unfortunately, there is a lack of research investigating the relationship between these reforms and increased income inequality and population health-related outcomes, particularly among adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe. Adolescence is an important period of transition between childhood and adulthood due to crucial biological and social developmental changes. Most mental disorders in adulthood start to develop during adolescence. During this phase of time, the influence of parents diminishes and that of their peers increases, exposing them to several risk factors which can establish long-term unhealthy behavioral patterns. All of this can have negative consequences on their physical health, emotional well-being, social relationships, and academic achievement, and can jeopardize their health outcomes later in life. Therefore, given the above-mentioned, the aim of our research is to study how large income differences affect adolescent health-related outcomes in post-communist countries of Europe. We are going to study how large income differences within a country affect both adolescents from low-income and high-income families. In our research, we use data from the Health Behavior in School-Aged Children study, which is a WHO collaborative survey conducted across Europe and North America, involving more than 40 countries. It is being conducted every 4 years, and we have utilized the data from the most recent available surveys conducted in 2009-10, 2013-14, and 2017-18 years. In addition to individual-level data, we have utilized country-level data, such as Gini index, which is a measure of country income inequality, and GDP per capita, which is a measure of country economic development. Both measures were taken from the World Bank estimates. The Health Behavior in School-Aged Children study is a school-based survey utilizing standardized methodology and validated tools to collect data from nationally representative samples of adolescents aged 11, 13, and 15 years. Self-administered questionnaires were completed in classrooms, and the necessary ethical considerations were met before collecting the data. The results of our research show that low socioeconomic position has a major negative influence on adolescent health in post-communist countries of Europe. We also found that many low-income adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe may engage in risky health behaviors as a way of coping with or compensating for the negative health influences of their low socioeconomic position. Specifically, we found that many low-income adolescents can use various substances, such as different types of alcohol, tobacco, and even cannabis, to manage their poor mental health. We also found that some low-income adolescents can resort to vicious behavior, such as bullying others, to improve their social standing in peer group hierarchies and feel better, either through improved control, social participation, or decreased status anxiety. As we can see on this chart, the prevalence of low psychosocial well-being and less than good health is substantially lower in low-income adolescents who bullied others during the previous 2 months compared to their peers from low-income families who didn't exhibit this kind of behavior. But we also found that substance use and bullying perpetration are prevalent among high-income adolescents, especially in post-communist countries of Europe with high-income inequality. As we can see on this chart, the prevalence of risky health behaviors among high-income adolescents is similar to their peers from low-income families. And this relationship was consistent across different substances, such as alcohol use, tobacco use, cannabis use, but also bullying perpetration. Moreover, we found that as the country income inequality increases, the likelihood of risky health behaviors among high-income adolescents increases compared to their peers from low-income families. On this chart, Gini index represents the country income inequality. And the higher the Gini index, the larger the income differences within the country. The odds ratios are showing how many times the likelihood of risky health behaviors is greater among high-income adolescents compared to low-income adolescents. For example, 1.6 odds ratio here is showing that the likelihood of risky health behaviors is 60% more among high-income adolescents, whereas 0.6 shows that it is 40% less among high-income adolescents compared to their peers from low-income families. We can see a clear linear relationship between these two measures in this chart. Based on our findings, previous studies, and existing theories exploring the relationship between high-income inequality and population health-related outcomes, we proposed the Golden Youth hypothesis to explain our findings. The term Golden Youth is being used in post-communist countries of Europe to describe children of wealthy governmental officials and businessmen who exhibit high levels of fun-seeking and irresponsible behavior. Thus, based on this Golden Youth hypothesis, it suggests that many high-income adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe with large income inequality may engage in high-risk behavior, possibly because of insecure self-image and fear of losing their high status, power, and prestige. We contend that some adolescents from high-income backgrounds may resort to risky health behaviors as a means to demonstrate their high social standing when other avenues are not available. And we open room for further research, including qualitative studies, to explore deeper the behavior and motives of the Golden Youth in post-communist countries of Europe. In conclusion, the results of our study show that moving towards less neoliberal policies and creating a strong welfare state that promotes economic and social well-being of the population and reduces income inequality might be a necessary component of macro-level strategies aimed at preventing risky health behavior and improving the health of adolescents. We recommend that in addition to policies that can effectively address income inequality and promoting healthier ways of seeking social status might be needed to prevent risky health behaviors among adolescents. Also, more robust and effective anti-bullying policies in schools and effective interventions for preventing substance use involving parents and schools might be necessary to prevent this unhealthy and vicious behavior among adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe, especially those with high income inequality. Thank you for your attention. I give the board back to the prorector.
Thank you very much for your clear presentation. We will now start with the opposition, and the opposition will be opened by Professor Pavlova, who was also the chair of the assessment committee. She is Professor of Health Economics and Equity at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, my congratulations to you and to your supervisory team for this important dissertation. Your dissertation focuses on a very relevant and up-to-date topic with important implications for policy and for research. Specifically, the focus on health-related socioeconomic inequalities among adolescents in post-communist country is a rather under-explored field. And your dissertation makes an important contribution, providing information for decision makers, but also for research for those interested in the area. I will be happy to discuss with you some points regarding the framing of the dissertation. So, how the dissertation is built from the different studies and why. So this is what I would like to discuss, not only the policy point of view, but looking at the methodology point of view as well. So the first point is that I kind of miss solid overarching goal in your dissertation. Of course, we have seen in the presentation, and we have also the title of the dissertation, but in the section where you present the different aims, in that section, I miss this overarching goal. So I just see the different aims. How you would explain the choice of the different aims and how these different aims are sufficient to answer this overarching research question or goal that you have had in mind when you started your dissertation. So if you can explain a bit about the comprehensiveness of the set of aims that you have. So that's my first question.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. First of all, let me provide some background information on how the aims of our study were derived. We have utilized different theories. And first, the theory was Patrick West's hypothesis on health equalization among adolescents, who found in western part of Scotland that among adolescents, the health-related outcomes among low-income and high-income adolescents are the same. And based on this finding, he proposed this hypothesis. That's one of the possible explanations. He suggested that alternative hierarchies, and such as bullying others, can play a role in this equalization. And we used his hypothesis, and we built one of the research aims based on his hypothesis. Also, Richard Wilkinson, based on extensive previous research on income inequality and population health outcomes, also suggested that high income inequality can create this toxic psychosocial environment which can affect population health. And also, in his book, he reported that bullying, one of the possible outcomes that they found is the bullying among school-aged children, adolescents. And, but he didn't specify whether the income inequality particularly more affects high-income or low-income adolescents. He showed that, on average, the level of bullying in schools is increasing. We have found a similar relationship, but also we have shown that income inequality affects in post-communist countries of Europe more high-income adolescents compared to low-income, their peers from low-income families. And based on these two theories, we have suggested our research aims, which the overarching research aim is to study how income inequality actually is affecting population health-related outcomes in post-communist countries of Europe, and particularly among adolescents.
Okay, so as I understand, you focus on this general area of research, and based on what is already done in the literature, you formulated hypotheses for the specific context. Yes. Okay, that makes me very happy to hear. Then I would also like to reflect now after, to look at the end of the dissertation, where you have the general discussion chapter. I think there would have been nice to have a bit more cross-chapter discussion points. I find it difficult to understand the chapters. Are they complementing each other? Are they contradicting each other? Are they adding to each other? So what do you think is the added value of each chapter to achieve this overarching goal?
Thank you.
Any contradictions or similar results across the chapters?
Thank you. Our results, in my opinion, our results support each other and add additional evidence towards the hypotheses, towards the theories that we have studied, and towards the golden youth hypothesis that we have proposed as a result of this research. If you can provide me more details on what kind of contradicting issues you want me to address.
Yeah. I'm asking you if you observe any contradicting, conflicting results or similar results. Are the chapters complementing each other, and how they're complementing each other?
Thank you again, but in my opinion, the results were supporting each other rather than contradicting. Of course, there can be some limitations that is subject to further research to find more detailed answers to these questions. But overall, they were complementing each other. Okay.
And imagine that you have a big research grant and you can continue doing your research. What study you are going to propose to conduct so that helps you to explore further the topic?
Thank you for your question. First of all, it will be very important to conduct a qualitative study in several of post-communist countries of Europe to account for the social differences and account for the social context in these countries, to understand better the social, psychological factors driving high-income adolescents and also adolescents from other income backgrounds to resort to vicious behaviors such as bullying perpetration or to risky health behaviors such as increased alcohol use, binge drinking, and tobacco smoking, cannabis use. I think this is very relevant nowadays, and we can see the statistics from many countries showing that this is an up-to-date issue that needs to be studied, especially in post-communist countries of Europe.
Do you think that this kind of study will allow you to make more concrete conclusions? Because the conclusions that we have seen are more general in terms of that inequality should be reduced, but how we can reduce the inequalities? Or are we only able to deal with the consequences of inequalities?
Thank you for your question. I will try to address in two parts your question. First of all, our results suggest that high-income inequality can cause unhealthy behaviors among adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe. And additional studies, of course, will be needed, especially for the golden youth hypothesis, to provide support to these hypotheses. Or if we have a substantial body of evidence suggesting some other hypotheses that can explain these findings, we would consider that hypothesis more priority. Unless we have this kind of data, our hypothesis, I consider our hypothesis is priority since it is based on some consistent evidence, previous studies, also supported by the existing theory, socio-epidemiological theories. In relation to risky health behaviors of adolescents, of course, we need more studies to understand, as I said already, the psychological and social determinants to tailor our public health interventions accordingly. But it doesn't mean that we don't need to address the upstream factor, very important upstream factors such as country income inequality, which can have much widespread and much deep influence on adolescent behavior and also have influence on the overall population health. I know that some studies are showing that even in countries with low income inequality, there are still socioeconomic differences in population health-related outcomes. And even as a result of extensive investments to address this issue, they have observed, for example, such as Sweden, even some increase in socioeconomic differences in health outcomes. But it doesn't mean we should not address this issue in our further efforts, because we can see, I can go to my previous slide, on this slide where we saw a relationship between Gini index and bullying perpetration, but also similar relationship we found related to other typical health behavioral patterns of adolescents in post-communist countries of Europe when we examined, for example, bullying, tobacco smoking, alcohol drinking, binge drinking, and bullying perpetration, or the combination of these behaviors, since many adolescents had more than one risky health behavior. We can see as the country...
Thank you very much. I'm very satisfied with your answer, so I would like to give the word back to the prorector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Pavlova. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Schelleman, Assistant Professor at the Department of Social Psychology at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you and also your supervisory team for the excellent studies you presented in your thesis. I really enjoyed reading your thesis, and the fact that already all your chapters are published is just underlines the excellence of the work, so well done. Especially the studies presented in chapter 4 and 5 grasped my interest, and I will start my question regarding chapter 5. So in chapter 5, you investigate the golden youth hypothesis, which suggests that children of wealthy parents are at increased risk of alcohol use due to social or affiliative motives, which involves using alcohol as a status symbol to establish or maintain friendly relationships with peers or of similar or even wealthier backgrounds. It also suggests, this chapter, that wider income inequality in a country, the wider the income inequality, the higher the levels of social comparison and increased status anxiety, resulting in more excessive alcohol use, which makes the suggestion that adolescents with a high socioeconomic position would drink for coping reasons, perhaps, which seems a little bit contradictory with the golden youth hypothesis. Also, considering the results that you present in chapter 3, where adolescents with a high socioeconomic position seem to be protected by low levels of mental health problems, I'm not entirely convinced that status anxiety plays a role in the drinking behavior of adolescents with a high socioeconomic position. Rather, I think it's the mechanism of status celebration that might better explain the increased drinking in adolescents with a high socioeconomic position. And this bigger effect found in countries with a high income inequality might be driven by the even lower alcohol consumption of the adolescents with a low socioeconomic position in these countries, because they simply cannot afford to drink. So I would like to hear your reflection on which motives you believe are actually playing a role in the explanation of the higher drinking of adolescents with a higher socioeconomic position, and whether you believe or whether you convince me it's really status anxiety, or whether it might be more status celebration.
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. I will also draw your attention on the Chapter 6 findings. When we examine the typical health behavioral patterns of adolescents, since, as I said, one adolescent can have more than one risky health behaviors. And again, here, when we examined the alcohol use pattern with other risky health behaviors, we saw the similar pattern of increase among high income adolescents. The risky health behaviors, not only alcohol use, but also tobacco smoking, bullying perpetration, binge drinking, or combination of these behaviors. And the results of our study showed that not only, first of all, the average level of risky health behaviors in the population is increasing, both among low-income adolescents and high-income adolescents, but among high-income adolescents, it is increasing more compared to their peers from low-income families. And we saw the clear linear relationship in this clear linear relationships between these two measures. Previous studies as well showed that among post-communist countries of Europe, the social affiliative and excitement-seeking motives mediated the relationship between high socioeconomic position and alcohol drinking among adolescents. Others authors as well in their findings suggested that alcohol use can be a status symbol for high-income adolescents in using alcohol and also exhibiting other risky health behaviors. And as I said, my observations as a social epidemiologist from the post-communist countries of Europe support this hypothesis. But of course, we will need more studies to investigate in detail the motives of the high-income adolescents in these exhibiting unhealthy behaviors.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you that social motives would play a role, and also enhancement motives, right? But the anxiety status, or status anxiety, wouldn't that be more related to coping drinking then? And this is, I don't think that underlines what you find in your studies. Doesn't that contradict with the golden youth hypothesis? That's
of course, some of high-income adolescents can use as a coping motive, but we observed a strong socioeconomic gradient in health among adolescents, meaning that high-income adolescents had much better mental health and overall health compared to their low-income peers. Therefore, the increased alcohol consumption or other risky health behaviors related to poor mental health as a means of coping with poor mental health cannot be the primary factor explaining the relationship between high alcohol use or high risky health behaviors and high income among these adolescents.
So you would expect enhancement, social and coping motives to play a role in maybe certain subclusters of the high-income adolescents?
Not all, of course. Not all high-income adolescents can be considered golden youth, as I said. Golden youth, we refer to only adolescents who exhibit this kind of high fun-seeking and responsible behavior with high levels of risky health behavior, such as alcohol use or bullying perpetration. And this is the only portion of high-income adolescents. And the motives between them, as I said, can be different. But we think that the primary motives is status anxiety to conform with the norms of their social circle and to avoid being excluded from their from their peer social circles.
Thank you. Then I would also like you to reflect on the second part of the question. So I want to hear your perspective on how specific you believe the Golden Youth hypothesis is for the nouveau riche in post-communist countries, or whether this theory might be not that specific for these countries, but maybe could be even generalized to also more Western countries. Since also in these countries, there are signs that there are positive associations between socioeconomic position and alcohol consumption. So we also find that here also the higher socioeconomic position, or adolescents with a higher socioeconomic position, drink more in a number of countries. So how specific is this Golden Youth hypothesis for these specific countries, or is it a phenomenon that can be generalized to more countries?
Thank you for your question. Of course, the local context plays an important role. What our data suggests is that country income inequality can increase the risk of risky health behaviors among adolescents. In some countries, it can be exhibited in one way, in other countries in another way. But in my opinion, it is going to be manifested in other countries in one or another way. Therefore, it is very important to address high income inequality, not only in post-communist countries of Europe, but also in other countries as well.
Mm-hmm. Do I still have time? No. Okay, then I'll give the word back. Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schelleman. The opposition will be continued by Professor Bobak, Professor of Epidemiology at University College London in the UK, and Professor Bobak is online.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. I also enjoyed reading your thesis, and since I have a long-term interest in Central Eastern Europe, I found it really nice that somebody finally systematically focused on adolescent health. It's really a neglected area. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the Armenian context, because I know very little about Armenia. So how does the educational situation look like? Is there some sort of social patterning of education of children and adolescents and young adults in Armenia? Is there some sort of social differences in educational mobility between generation? What proportion of adolescents continue going to tertiary education? Is there social gradient in uptake of tertiary education after they finish secondary school or primary school, secondary school, which was sort of subject of your study? What is the situation in Armenia in relation to educational achievements?
Highly esteemed professor, thank you for your question. Although this was not part of our book, but generally the high proportion of adolescents are pursuing higher education in Armenia. I would say that socioeconomic differences, in my opinion, related to this issue are increasing compared to the previous times, compared to the previous, before the Cold War, where the social mobility was much higher. And children from different socioeconomic backgrounds could have more or less equal opportunity to gain a higher degree and even a terminal degree in our countries. In my opinion, nowadays, although I don't have data to speculate on this issue more, I think the socioeconomic differences are increasing.
Do you think that some sort of segregation, patterning of children in different schools by their family background, socioeconomic status, things like this? Would there be schools which would be predominantly from higher, children from higher social groups, maybe because of the residential patterning of the population?
For your question, there are gradually increasing the number of private schools in Armenia and in post-communist countries of Europe, but still there is little segregation by residential areas between high-income and low-income families, so they are still mixed, more or less. And in the public schools, we can see both adolescents from high-income and low-income families substantially.
Thank you. You probably see where I'm going. Since your study design was cluster design, I was thinking whether some of your results may have been partly due to sort of clustering of certain social groups in certain schools. I know that you adjusted for clustering in the analysis, but at least in the early chapters, it really only inflates the standard errors rather than taking into account the clustering. But do you think this would not affect your results?
Thank you for your question. In our further studies as well, we used mixed methods, which actually takes into account the hierarchical structure of the data. So we took into consideration this aggregation of children with similar socioeconomic backgrounds or similar behavior according to the classes, according to schools, and also according even to the regions. Therefore, and the relationship that we found was quite strong, suggesting that it cannot be just merely because of this clustering of the data, but rather it's a real association.
Thank you. I have two questions about measurements. I assume that the study you use, does it have or it doesn't have question about parental education?
Thank you. No, unfortunately, our data set didn't include questions related to parental education, and this is one of the limitations of our studies.
Yeah, I agree. With your measure of family socioeconomic position, which is really your basic stratifying variable throughout the thesis, you rely on one self-reported question, whether the family is higher or lower social status. How good do you think is this measure?
Thank you for your question. In our first chapters, we used two measures: self-reported socioeconomic position, also family affluence scale, which is asking questions regarding the material well-being of the family. But in further chapters, the first question was omitted from the data set. It was optional, so not in the mandatory list of questions. So it was not available. Only the separate countries had this variable. And mainly on the last chapters, we have relied on the material well-being family affluence scale to measure the family socioeconomic position, which was consistently actually shown to be a valid and reliable measure of family socioeconomic position among adolescents, and it is being widely used in many studies. But of course, additional measures of family socioeconomic position will enhance our study.
Thank you. And my final quick question. In most of your papers, you dichotomized the family socioeconomic position. And I was a bit surprised about it because in actually in all populations I've seen, there is a gradient, social gradient in various health outcomes, not just rich and poor, low and high, but the gradient, which I think is one of the most interesting things in social epidemiology. Why you didn't use more granular measure of socioeconomic position? I know you have 5 categories. Why, could you have used, in one paper you used low, medium, and high. In other papers you used just the binary measure. Why did you do it?
Your question, at the beginning of our studies, we concentrated on Armenia, and I decided to dichotomize to have enough responses in each of the cells when analyzing the data. But later, when we had more larger sample size, I used the standard way of categorizing the family affluence scale, which was done by in the HBSC study report. Also, in the latest 2017-18 study, this variable was already present as a categorized variable in the data set. So from the beginning to the end, I have used this standard approach of using the categorized variable. But of course, it will be interesting, thank you for your suggestion, to replicate our findings using a continuous variable, the family affluence scale as a continuous variable, to see if there are any differences.
Thank you.
Professor Bobak, we will continue the opposition with Dr. Unema, Associate Professor of Health Promotion at the Open University in Heerlen.
Thank you. Dear candidates, I would also like to start with congratulating you and your supervisors with your dissertation and the important work that you did in generating some important insights into health aspects and socioeconomic inequalities in Armenian youth. And you have all described this in very well written and well published papers, so that's worth a compliment. It was a pleasure to read your work and to get a bit of a glimpse of the impact of the socio-economic transitions in your country, which that had on health and risk behaviors of youth. So I really like to get a bit of an idea of how things, about the problems that are playing there. It was also a pleasure to read how you placed your findings within the context of existing theories, specifically in the discussion section. But also how you tried to develop an own theory, or at least a hypothesis, that of the golden youth. That's also worth a compliment. But of course, I'm not here to only give you compliments, but to discuss some issues with you. And I would like to talk with you about the studies that you did on bullying perpetration. And my first question is more conceptual in nature, because I would like to invite you to give some more rational and some theoretical underpinnings maybe for why you chose to use bullying perpetration as a risk factor for health or as an alternative hierarchy that may act as a buffer between socioeconomic position and health outcomes. So why did you choose this concept? And is there a theoretical or a good conceptual underpinning for it?
Esteemed Professor, thank you for your question. I will probably go back to West's hypothesis, which suggests that during this phase of life, during adolescence, the peer group hierarchies, peer influences can alter the relationship between socioeconomic status and health-related outcomes among adolescents. And one of the factors that he suggested he suggested that it can be more relevant to psychosocial health-related outcomes, such as mental health or all risky health behaviors among adolescents. Also, he suggested that the equalization can happen either due to improving the health or health-related behavior of low-income adolescents or worsening of those from high-income families. And particularly, he suggested that it can happen related to risky health behaviors such as bullying perpetration, but also other risky health behaviors. Bullying perpetration is considered, as he considered, and in other literature also considered, as a way of dominating others as a way of improving the social standing in peer group hierarchies, to achieving access to more probably resources, to become more, to have more access to resources. Also, longitudinal studies, for example, recent longitudinal study among US adolescents showed that bullying others, adolescents who bullied others, later, when they become young adults, the stress biomarkers were much lower, such as inflammatory markers, compared to adolescents who didn't bully others. And other theories, especially developmental theories, also suggest that it can be a way of dominating their peers and pushing others downwards on the social hierarchy. All of this information suggested us that it can be an important factor in changing the socioeconomic gradient in health, as West suggested. Also, income inequality has been connected to bullying others as well, or both bullying victimization and bullying perpetration. And that was the basis for including this variable as one of the key variables in our research.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear, because you had to work with existing data. So it also, my question behind it was a bit, is it not driven by the fact that you had the bullying perpetration as a measure? But you explained very well that it was there's a good idea behind it. But you also use bullying perpetration as a health risk factor. Can you explain a little bit more about that? And in chapter 7 specifically, you put it almost on the same level as other health risk behaviors, such as substance use. So what kind of factor do you think bullying perpetration has in relation to health outcomes as a health risk factor?
Thank you for your question. In multiple studies, bullying perpetration was also associated with other risky health behaviors. So adolescents who exhibit bullying behavior also can use other risky health behaviors, such as alcohol, tobacco, or binge drinking, cannabis use. This kind of association have been observed in the literature.
Yes. But does that make bullying perpetration also a health risk behavior, or is it more a distal variable that results in all kinds of other behaviors? Where would you place it?
I understand. Thank you for your question again. I understand there is a complex relationship between these variables and health, and longitudinal studies will be best probably to answer to this question. And as you know, the risky health behaviors such as alcohol use, tobacco smoking, in long term can have profound effect on people's and also to adolescents' health, but in a more on long term. And taking into account, again, that the longitudinal study showing that bullying perpetration actually decreasing the inflammatory markers in young adulthood, it is more supporting the golden youth hypothesis.
But if it's positively associated to health, is it then a risk behavior?
It's a vicious behavior, first of all, and it's a risky behavior not only for others, but the person who exhibits this kind of behavior, because in the long run, it is associated with antisocial behavior. It is associated with family violence, with substance use, with antisocial behavior. So all kind of risky health behaviors are associated with bullying perpetration in adolescents. So that is why it is very important to prevent it as soon as it is possible.
Yeah. Do I have more time? No? Then thank you for your answers, and I give the word back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Unema. The opposition will be continued by Professor Kronen, Professor of Health Promotion at Maastricht University, and she's present online.
Yeah, the candidates. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. I also think you have written an interesting thesis, as I also, and I would like to congratulate you and your supervisors with this thesis. And I especially find it interesting because I did some analysis on adolescents in the Netherlands, also regarding substance abuse and other risk-taking behaviors. And we also find, a group with an increased likelihood of risk-taking behaviors. And in this example, actually, it was related to the middle levels of educational, the middle levels of socioeconomic positions. So, but that was based on the educational level of the adolescents and their parents. So maybe somewhat in line with Professor Dr. Martin Bobak, I was wondering how it was, and I'm looking at the chapters for Armenia. There you often use a binary categorization of socioeconomic position, but how do you see actually that the higher socioeconomic positions and the lower socioeconomic positions seems to do less well than in one of the chapters where you actually use these middle affluent families as a reference group. So how do you think about these middle affluent families, that's the middle socioeconomic position groups? What is their role in Armenia?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Our results show that actually the middle income adolescents can be considered the best group.
Yeah.
And it will be interesting to study also, and it will be very important to study, to understand the factors that make them actually the best group. It can be possibly with the better parental monitoring or some other factors, which is subject to further research.
Yes, I also saw that. Then, but because in another time, because it was based on this one question in which you ask how well the situation is of the parents, and then sometimes they say that they are well off or very well off are put together as high income, high socioeconomic position, and sometimes they are separated, and so there seems to be some overlap in between the chapters. So why didn't you decide for the other chapters to also use these three categories?
Thank you for your question. We used two categories at the beginning of our studies, for the first two studies actually, when we were focusing mainly on Armenia. And sample size suggested, especially to have enough number of risky health behaviors, for example, in both low income and high income adolescents, to conduct a statistical analysis. The data suggested, based on bivariate analysis, that two categories of income is more appropriate. But later, starting already for the third publication, we had much larger sample size. For example, in the publication, in the chapter where we compared where we studied the mediating role of between socioeconomic status and risk and alcohol use, the mediating role of poor health. Already we combined the data from 2 years, 2009 and 10 and 2013-14, and we had a larger sample size, which allowed us to have 3 categories of income. But also, and later we continued in the same way in other chapters. And as I told you, in 2017 and 18 data set, this variable was already present as categorized in 3 categories: low, middle, and income. as it is generally being reported in HBSC studies. And I decided to not create a new variable, but just proceed with the existing variable to avoid any.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then I would maybe then reflect further, because one of the things that I saw that...
Can you be very short? Very short question and a short answer?
Yeah, short answer, because I saw that the percentage of smokers was actually much lower than in the Netherlands populations. So I was wondering whether maybe in some times you will see the same percentage of smokers, but also of mental health problems, all the same problems in Armenia as in the Western countries. Do you think that this epidemiological transition will also happen in Armenia? That the things that happen in the West will also go to the East?
Thank you for your question. In Armenia, the prevalence of smoking is much higher among boys compared to girls. And this can be one of the reasons that the average level of smoking was somehow lower compared to Netherlands or other Western countries. But also in Armenia, adolescents start smoking a little bit later compared to Western countries, according to my observations and according to the data that I have compared, not in our book, but separately. And of course, with increasing income inequality and other this kind of risky health behaviors, it can have some lead time to manifest themselves. So, and I would be interested also to study the time differences, how it is changing in Armenia, and what are the trajectories of these risky health behaviors in Armenia as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kronen. We now go to the last opponent, is Dr. Serge, Assistant Professor at the Department of International Health of Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, congratulations to you and the promotion team on a very well-written book. I had a lot of pleasure reading it, and it's always a pleasure to meet a fellow traveler in trying to understand health in post-communist Europe. You explained the emergence of golden youth as a reaction to the neoliberal policies that emerged during the political transition in post-communist countries, and you also explicitly link it to high income inequality. How certain are you that the phenomenon is driven primarily by income inequality, as opposed to, say, the culture created by neoliberal reforms? In other words, do we really need to tackle income inequality, or do we need to tackle the attitudes and beliefs that enabled neoliberal policies to pass in the first place?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. As I understand, your question is about should we avoid neoliberal reforms to prevent risky health behaviors rather than we should address income inequality, high income inequality?
That's right. So I'm asking you about, is it really income inequality that is driving the phenomenon, or is it the wider cultural context of neoliberalism that is driving the association? And income inequality is just, let's say, if you draw, is there a confounder really there in the culture and the context that is playing a much larger role than income inequality per se?
Well, thank you for your question. We didn't study this issue in our book, but it's, in my opinion, it's difficult to attribute to some cultural context to explain the relationship between increasing neoliberal reforms and increased income inequality as a confounder, which Kelt actually, explained the findings. And within this period of time, I don't think the cultural context could have changed in such a short period of time. It's rather some political and economic changes that happened after the Cold War in many post-communist countries of Europe, which had it is very speculative on the reasons of these changes that happened, and probably the history only will allow us to understand how it happened and what happened. But the driving force was the neoliberal reform that have started. And it, as a vicious cycle, brought income inequality, also change in the mindset of the people, which drove more neoliberal reforms, more income inequality, and for example, professional unions and other institutions that were supposed to protect the rights of the working class weakened, which in turn exacerbated all of these issues.
Armen Torchyan, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Hit the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Armen Torchyan, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Bosma is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Please all rise.
Yep. Armen, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible? I promise. By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Armen Torchyan, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
The laudation will be held by Dr. Hauges.
Thank you. Esteemed Dr. Torchyan, dear Armen, dear family, you made it. Today you have reached the end of your PhD journey and you can officially call yourself Dr. Torchyan from now on. That is certainly something to be proud of. On behalf of our department chair and your promoter Hans Bosma, I want to congratulate you with this excellent achievement. I would like to involve your wife in these congratulations as well. I checked our internal track system for PhD students, and it appears that you officially started as an external PhD student on June 1st, 2020. At this point, you had already published a first article on socioeconomic health inequalities among Armenian adolescents together with Hans. Today, your position as a PhD student at Maastricht University officially comes to an end. There is no formal rule for the duration of projects of external PhD students, and there is also a wide variety in the duration of these projects, but your project lasted 4.5 years, which means that you were among the first group. I will come back to that later. You have performed an interesting study in the field of social epidemiology, which has resulted in a well-written and relevant dissertation. As you have explained so clearly today, your project focused on post-communist countries of Europe, where income inequality increased significantly after the Cold War. And your dissertation presents valuable evidence about socioeconomic differences in adolescent health and risky health behaviors in these countries, and the role of country income inequality in this regard. Your findings suggest that large income inequalities can have more adverse effects on adolescents with a high socioeconomic position. More than their peers from lower SEP families, they tend to engage in risky health behaviors that they might think symbolize high social standing. And this is the so-called golden youth hypothesis, which is very interesting and demands for more research, as we have heard today as well. I believe that the result of your research can also be used to adjust public health policies targeting adolescents in post-communist countries. You formulated several implications of your research yourself already. For instance, you see a role for families and schools in building social skills of adolescents and developing anti-bullying policies. You have performed this research from your background in public health and interest in social epidemiology, and alongside your job as a specialist in public health and preventive medicine at the King Saud University. You are also a husband and a father. This means that you had to balance multiple tasks in the last 4 years, and I greatly admire the perseverance and resilience necessary for completing this project. Let us look back at the journey behind us and your development as a researcher for a moment. As you are living in Saudi Arabia, practically the whole supervision took place virtually. All meetings were scheduled online, and we had a lot of email exchange. This procedure would not have worked for all PhD students, but somehow you managed to finish the project well with only online supervision. I think you actually preferred to be supervised this way. In fact, our first in-person meeting took place quite recently, during the Public Health Conference in Lisbon. You recognized me earlier than I recognized you, at a very busy and crowded conference in a room full of people. It was nice to talk to you in person, have lunch together, and discuss the final bits and pieces of this PhD project. You are a good epidemiologist, and you have shown remarkable analytical and writing skills. You were very fast in independently performing a large amount of advanced analysis and writing down the results. You managed to write and publish 6 articles in peer-reviewed journals within the duration of the PhD project. This is not very common. And even though you did not always seem happy about receiving feedback and even less happy about discussing feedback during Zoom meetings, you were always very quick in processing the feedback and making amendments in your manuscripts. This feedback usually concerned the need for a more elaborate introduction, helping the reader more with the interpretation of the results, and looking at the results from the perspective of a social epidemiologist or a health scientist. As mentioned, the analysis part was never a problem. Still, we were happy to see that at some point in the trajectory, you transformed from a classical methodology-oriented epidemiologist into a social epidemiologist and broader public health researcher. During the project, you showed a high level of autonomy and independence. You kept an eye on the planning, you searched for suitable journals to publish your work. You took good initiative and also asked for feedback and advice. At some points in the trajectory, we had the exceptional experience that the PhD student determined our agendas, tasks and deadlines instead of the other way around. It was also a learning experience for us. In the end, however, we always knew Armen will deliver the goods and bring this endeavor to a good end, as we can see evidenced today. All in all, it has been a fascinating journey, and we hope that finishing this project will help you improve your work-life balance and that you can use the research experience with us for ultimately improving population health, particularly that of vulnerable groups. We wish you the best of luck in your future career and good health and happiness for you and your family. I understand that you and your wife will be traveling through Europe before you return to your 3 daughters at home. We wish you a great experience and, of course, a safe trip back to Saudi Arabia. We hope that we can stay in touch and perhaps find opportunities for further collaboration. Dr. Torchyan, Armen, congratulations.
Thank you.
Dear Dr. Torchyan, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I would like to congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. Of course, I also would like to congratulate your wife, who's present here, but also your family, colleagues, and friends who hopefully are able to follow this ceremony online via the live stream. I'd like to congratulate your supervisors with this beautiful PhD defense. I'd like to thank the members of the committee here present and present online for their contribution to this PhD defense, especially our guests from outside Maastricht University. Professor Bobak, thank you very much for being present online and devoting your time to this PhD ceremony. And Dr. Unema, although you're a familiar face for Maastricht University, you're now located at Open University. Thank you very much. Your contribution to this PhD ceremony is very much appreciated by Maastricht University. I hope you also enjoyed the PhD ceremony. It's a bit strange to be here probably for the first time in Maastricht, as I understand. Is it your first visit to Maastricht?
Yes, it is my first visit.
Okay,
and I enjoyed it a lot. Thank
for
you very
such
much.
an important occasion. But I hope you enjoyed the defense, the procedures, and I can tell you that the committee was happy with the way you defended your thesis. You showed good knowledge about what you've done, what you've written in the book, and even trying to get a little bit outside the book was joyful to see for us. It's now time for you to relax from all this hard work and enjoy that you have obtained the doctorate from this university and enjoy your travels for the next days, weeks, I don't know how much time. And with this, I close this academic ceremony.
Thank you very much.
All right. I'm going to ask you if I can borrow your telephone for the pictures. Please come forward. Supervisors, please join. You will all meeting, yeah?
Recording stopped.